Now,
Hello,
Dr. Lee
Brenda.
Meadows. Hey, Lee, how are you doing today?
Hey, Brenda, how are you, my friend?
I am delighted. I'm so excited to have you on for our first speaker here today in this event. And by the way, we're here today for this. I'm calling this a LinkedIn Live-a-thon, Lee, for the
Yeah,
enthusiastically self-employed. And I know you're amongst the ranks of the enthusiastically self-employed, and you
yes, I
do a
am.
lot of work on your own, and you do a lot of work helping others as well. So before we jump into your talk today, why don't you take a few minutes, tell people a little bit about what your business is all about?
Well, I'm an independent consultant. I like that term solopreneur that you all have been marketing because that pretty much describes who I am now. While I am officially retired from teaching at Walsh for 20 years, um, I am technically um, re-energizing, and I'm operating under my own umbrella, Meadows Consulting. I do the stuff that I want to do in the time that I want to get it done, working with the folks that I want to work with. So my leadership stuff, my DEI stuff, my organizational change stuff, it's all stuff that I'm doing with clients who specifically want that set of skills and experience to help them through a particular process. So I'm having a good time as a solopreneur, if you will.
I love it. And the great thing about working for yourself as your own boss, you can decide what to do, what not to do, what time to
Yes.
work, when to work, but it is driving your business all the time. So today you're going to be talking to us about this amazing topic, consulting. It's not about you.
Yes.
And I always tell people, Lee, every time I hear you talk, and every time I hear you talk, I am both inspired and frustrated. And the inspired is because he's such a great speaker, but the frustrated, it's not because I'm frustrated what he's saying to me, but I'm frustrated because sometimes the advice I'm like, yeah, why are people like that? Or why aren't these things happening? Like he
Yeah.
brings up things and concepts that cause a little bit of that, I don't know, a little bit of that, like, I don't know what it's called, like a mental
It's called a slight irritation designed to get you
something.
to
I don't know.
move.
So I'm going to give the floor to you right now, Lee, and just so for all of you that are watching us, whether you're watching live on LinkedIn or YouTube, and we'll get a playback over to Facebook eventually. But if you're watching this live, or if you're watching this in playback, or maybe you're listening to the podcast version of this later, this event will be going today from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Come on when you can. And if you need to drop off, but you want to get the playbacks and the resources, make sure you register at mellermarketing.com/LILESE. And I'll be popping that on the link on screen periodically throughout the event today. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to swap our video order real quick. And we practiced this in the
Wow, I
pre-show.
felt that.
And I'm going to be pulling myself on screen. I'll come back in about 20 minutes here, Lee. So go ahead. And if you could lead us through your talk of consulting, it's not about you.
All right. And I'm glad to be here to have an opportunity to spend a few minutes with all of you who may be interested in this topic as solopreneurs or as entrepreneurs or as individuals who are specifically looking to get into some kind of consulting practice. The things that I want to emphasize today are primarily designed to get you to think about who you are in this process and how you go about connecting and gaining clients and providing your skill and expertise. Recognizing that there's two pieces to this. Anyone who wants to get involved in this kind of work, they're typically motivated by a need to want to be independent. There's an expertise that they develop that they want to share on a broader level, and they want to operate under a few less constraints, as they kind of move along their career path. And being an entrepreneur or solopreneur or a consultant typically requires those kinds of elements. Now, one of the things that happens when you're doing this is, of course, there's some things you need to know about being a consultant. And that is, one, please have a lot of self-confidence about what it is you have to deliver. Be absolutely insightful in terms of what that experience allows you to do. So getting some kind of reflective thought around that. And two, have a focus in mind. You don't want a scattergun approach to being a consultant. You want to identify what is that unique set of skills that you have to offer, that expertise that you want to share, and that kind of way of thinking about how you package that so that it benefits the client. Now, when I say benefits a client, I'm being very purposeful in that statement. In that, if I can share just for a few seconds here, one of the classic mistakes that individuals make when going into the consulting profession is to think that the process and the end result is all about them. Because look what's happening. You've got a set of expertise that you want to bring. There's some unique insights that you have. There's a knowledge base that you have, and there's this notion of taking a risk that more often than not doesn't happen with most people. So when you bring all those elements together, in many ways, it's an anchor of self-confidence that you both need to have going into this particular work, is essential to getting the work done, because any number of things that you encounter along the way will be a challenge toward that self-confidence. The problem that I have observed and also have experienced in terms of being in this work is that the tendency is to set yourself up so that what you are doing is selling you. You're selling your brand. You are selling who you are in your set of skills, in your background, and all that. You want a client to see you. And in many ways, that's a way of saying it's all about me and what I can provide to you. However, this is an extremely competitive field. If you're thinking about being a consultant in any of the behavioral development fields, like leadership development, like diversity, equity, inclusion, like organizational change or organizational development, or one-on-one coaching, this is a very competitive field. And there are any number of folks who have expertise, similar kinds of expertise, similar kinds of knowledge, maybe a different set of experiences, but everyone's been positioning themselves to be the best that a client would want. In doing that, one of the things you want to keep in mind is that when you start to engage with clients, you are not trying to sell a refrigerator. You are not trying to position yourself as the ultimate, why wouldn't you want to work with me kind of person. Because what the client is looking for at that point is they want to know if you understand their needs. This was brought home to me several years ago in an informal conversations that I had with a few clients at that time, who in the process of me just talking with them said, and I'm going to paraphrase what those conversations essentially summarized. They said, Lee, one of the things that we enjoy about having you as a consultant is that you never made it about you. And that was, and hearing that for the first time, a second time, a third time, got me to asking the specific question, well, what do you mean by that I never made it about me? I was told that, no, one of the things that you do, you spend time talking with and going the extra mile to understand what we needed from you, and recognize that if what we needed from you couldn't be delivered by you, you always made sure that we had an option to find someone who did have what we needed. The focus was always on what we needed, not what it was you wanted to provide. Now, that's a tricky gray area, my friends, because you do have a number of things that you wish to provide and that you can provide. The issue is making sure it's connecting with what the client needs. So when having the opportunity to reflect back on what that meant, what I was told is that, one, you spend a little bit more time listening, all right? And here's a Meadowism, because if you're in this field, everyone who does this kind of work, who's engaged in this kind of work, the first thing that they always tell you is that, well, you got to know how to be a good listener. I think it's a little bit more beyond that. And I'm going to give you a distinction just as a way of trying to separate one from the other. When you're the responder, in other words, the client or the the consultant who's trying to get information. When you are in a hearing mode, you are making statements. So a client says to you, I'm having X, Y, Z kinds of issues. And when you're in hearing mode, you're saying, well, here's what you need to do. Here's what I recommend. Try this, try that, bring me on board, et cetera, et cetera. So you're making statements because you've been in a hearing mode. What these clients wanted me to understand, and what I want all of you to understand, is that when you are listening, you ask questions, because those questions allow you to get at a deeper understanding of what's underneath the surface of what that client says he or she needs. So the client might start off by saying, well, I have a number of managers who I think need one-on-one coaching. And if I'm in hearing mode, what I heard was an opportunity for me to do some one-on-one coaching with these managers based on what that person said. And so I started making statements about what coaching is, how I do that, how I best represent that, et cetera, et cetera. However, if I'm in a listening mode and someone says, well, I think my clients need one-on-one coaching, then in listening mode, I have questions that I want to ask. Well, one, what makes you think that's what they need, to allow that person to give me more information? Is it all of your managers, or is it just one or two particular managers who seem to be more needy than others? Asking questions beyond the whole hearing mode is essential to being a good consultant, because when you start to piece that information together, i.e. presenting some kind of proposal for them to respond to, within that proposal, what you're trying to do is to capture what it was you heard through that questioning process. And that questioning process gives you the insights to determine essentially what that client needs now, if that's something you can provide. Because keep in mind, I know when a lot of you start out, the client, if you happen to connect and the client says, well, I need so-and-so and so-and-so, because you're trying to start your business, you will say, yeah, that's something that I'm capable of doing. I can provide that, or I can provide this, and I can provide that. And that's how a lot of us started this particular process. The real issue is when you start to portray yourself as someone who's capable of delivering more than what they're asking for, because of the enthusiastic need to get your consulting business going. So if there is a beginning point to making sure that consulting is not about you, I think you have to spend a little bit more time reflecting on what are the 3 areas in consulting that you can do off the top of your head. Is it leadership development? Is it diversity, equity, inclusion? Is it organizational change? Because those pillars establish the foundation for how you engage with a client. So that when a client contacts you, or you contact a client and they're interested in knowing what it is that you do, you can talk about what you provide, but you also can let that client know that, but I need to understand what it is that you need. Talk to me about what it is that's going on in the organization that's allowed you to put together this picture where this particular need has emerged. Clients need to feel as if like you've listened to them, like you're willing to engage with them, that you are capturing their needs in such a way that when you come back at them with a proposal, they can look at that and go, yes, this person was indeed listening to me. Now, as I put all that in place, that's no absolute guarantee that every client you engage with is going to be a client who says, yes, please come and do this. I, Brenda, Cassandra, we've all been the recipients of that age-old, let's kind of get this out of the way statement of, I decided to go in another direction. And man, what a blow to the ego. What a blow to the consulting ego, especially early in the process. One of the things you want to keep in mind is that whenever that statement is made, more often, in terms of being consistent with the title, it wasn't about you. It was about things that were deeper underneath the surface, or connections around that particular need for which you had no control over. And because you have no control over, those things just kind of go away. Well, if you're early in the process, let me assure you that that is the name of the game. That whenever, even if you listen to a client with the most sincerest of intent to make absolutely sure that you are capturing everything that they want, proposing that back to them, that's still no guarantee that they're going to run with you. And in that regard, it really never was about you. Because if you put your best into it, if you've listened, if you've done all the things that are essential to strengthening that connection with that client, and it still doesn't work out, in that case, it wasn't about you. It wasn't about, it was more about them and some things that you have no control over. So when you start this process, or even if you're in the middle of the process, it is important to recognize that as someone who's taken a risk to be independent, and I can attest to that, as someone who's taken the risk to be independent, there are a number of landmines with your picture on it that are part of this journey. What you don't want to do is explode those landmines on that journey at a time when you're trying to make for a smoother path for your client. So there's always going to be something, and I refer to it, this is a Meadowism, there's always something creeping around the bushes that you may not have any control over. But the thing that you know you have the most control over is who you are, what you have to offer, and how you engage with that client. And engaging with that client is really a matter of you taking the deliberate and purposeful time to clearly understand what they need, suppressing one's own self-confidence and ego in that exchange, to listen and listen intently and ask the right questions to get at what is essentially going on with this client. Because I have found that more often than not, what the client initially leads with as a concern, that through a simple questioning process based on the notion of listening, there are other things underneath the surface that really capture what that client is trying to accomplish. And that's the thing that at a certain point in time, you're going to recognize that that's really what they wanted to talk about, not this particular thing that's on the surface. So as I start to wind down this part of my live-a-thon, let me make sure that everyone understands that, one, I love being a consultant. I absolutely love it. I wake up every day embracing the notion that there's a client that I'm going to serve. There's a presentation that I'm going to do. There's a speaking engagement that I'm going to have. But being a consultant allows me to engage broadly with the issues that are going on out there, to look for common patterns across organizations and across disciplines. And that gives me additional knowledge in the design and delivery of the things that a client both wants and needs. And clients always are interested in knowing, well, have you done this before? What's it look like in other settings? Who have you connected with? Help me get comfortable with the relationship so I can really begin to tell you what's underneath the surface of all this. And then we can engage in something that's going to lead to some kind of positive outcome. So I can see Brenda is about to put up the timeout sign. And it's been an absolute joy and pleasure to lead this off for you, Brenda. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. And I'm more than happy to, if we have time to take questions or comments or anything like that as a way of just winding it down. So go ahead with that solopreneur career, gang. Understand the things that you need to do in order to make it a good experience for you.
I love it. And again, if you were listening at the beginning, I said any time I listen to Lee, I'm always like inspired and a little frustrated, like because he brings up things in my brain like, why do people do that? Because I've had instances where I'm on the phone with somebody and I'm interested in doing business with them, and they're not. What did you say? They're hearing me, but they're not really listening. And as
Yes.
soon as I say something that's related to their service, then I just feel like they're pushing their service down my throat as
Yes.
opposed to doing the exploratory process. And
Yeah.
I really love that.
Well,
So,
yeah.
so Lee, we've had a couple of comments that are coming in. If it's okay with you, I'm going to pull a couple of those up on screen. And I see one from Laura: consulting services are bought, not sold. It sounds like that's been your experience too, right, Lee?
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Laura. That's a great comment.
Yeah. And you've been talking about solopreneurship, and I see a couple, and sometimes when I see these LinkedIn user, it just means privacy settings are a bit locked down on the profile. But you talk about being a solopreneur, and being self-employed or being a consultant, can scare the crap out of people.
Yeah.
But the water's fine over here, isn't it, Lee?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what a lot of folks need to know is not everybody does that. There's a reason why organizations are able to employ a lot of folks, within that structure, because there aren't a lot of folks who take that kind of risk to step out and try something. And for those who do that, yeah, I like swimming in this water, Brenda. I like the fact that you and me and Cassandra and Tina, we all get a chance to swim in this water. But let's make sure everyone understands it was murky in the beginning.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like diving into the deep end of the pool at night when you can't really see what's in the bottom. And is there a shark or a gator down there? Like, we don't know, but
We don't know.
we don't know.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good.
Well,
And
we managed to outswim them once we know they're there.
we did, right? We figured it out, and then we warned our friends, like, watch out for the gator over there. Go to this shallow end. It's all good. I
Absolutely.
see a couple comments. Someone saying, it looks like there might have been a little hiccup in the live stream. I didn't see the hiccup from my end. So if you did experience a hiccup and the show restarted, I'm hoping the playback will smooth everything out for you, because it was one consistent stream from here. I did not lose anything. But thank you guys for letting me know. And if there's aren't any technical issues as we're going throughout the day, please do let us know. And keep dropping your comments in here. I see one more that came in from Brian. And look at this, Lee. Brian saying he's got a discovery call coming this afternoon, and he's now going to shift his approach and ask a lot more questions. So
way to go, Brian. Great. Great. Ask those questions to make sure you know what that person really wants.
Yeah. And I always find too, when you do those discovery calls to Brian, asking more questions, the person's going to leave the phone call feeling like, wow, Brian actually got to know me. Most
Yeah.
people don't do that. Most people are just leading with their pitch, why you should work with them. It's an entirely different approach. And Lee does a really good job, as a consultant, as a human being, as a mentor, as a speaker, in really getting to know his audiences. And I hope that came across in his approach here. By the way, Lee, you told us a little bit about your business, and I see other folks that are coming into the audience, just like Linda. And I want to encourage, if you're watching this right now in the live stream on LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever, drop a comment in and do what Linda's done. Introduce yourself, because you never know when you're going to bump into someone, or someone may read your comment that is interested in doing business with you. So thank you,
Exactly.
Linda, for starting off those introductions on there. Speaking of
Thank you,
introductions,
Linda.
yeah, there you go. Speaking of introductions, I want to introduce our next speaker, Macarena. I'm just going to pull her on screen real quick to make sure that she can see and hear us. She's in the background. Hey, Macarena, how are you doing today?
Hi, how are
Hi,
you
Macarena.
guys? Hi,
Good.
nice to meet you, Lee.
Nice
Yeah,
to
I don't
meet
know if
you
you had the
too.
chance to meet either of you yet, but Macarena, I'm going to put you back in the green room for now, and we'll bring you back on screen in just a few minutes, if that'd be
Sounds
all right
good.
with you.
Yep,
All right. And for
I'm
those of
here.
you who are watching, I'm serving as kind of host, co-host, and I need to make sure my speakers are coming on. And since we're doing a live-a-thon nonstop, back to back, this is one of my techniques of bringing the speakers up there. So Lee, what I want to start to do now is to, as we wind down our conversation, great thoughts here. We're getting the gears started and thinking about the fact that, consulting is not about you. That was the topic to kick us off here for today. Now, there may be folks that are interested in learning more about you, or maybe even working with you. So Lee, can you summarize for us what are the offerings that you might have for solopreneurs or for consultants that might be interested in doing business with you?
Well, Brenda, as you know, leadership development is my passion. That's followed me across 30 plus years of experiences. So I love doing leadership development work, especially in this kind of new generational diverse workplace, because I think styles of leadership have got to adapt to in accordance to that. But even with that, I love doing diversity, equity, inclusion work because it's very important work, because it does connect with how the demographics are changing and how people and how folks lead that. And of course, anything around change management, that's just something that I just enjoy doing those kinds of work, besides my general teaching. So yes, if individuals have those kinds of things in mind, that's where, that's the heart of Lee Meadows when he's doing consulting work.
I love it. And I think we're going to encourage people to go out to your profile on LinkedIn. Is that the best way for folks to get a hold
Yes,
of
that's
you,
the
Lee?
best way to do that. That's the
Okay.
best way to do that. And
I did.
and you all need to know, Brenda has been mentoring me on this for years, and I create frustration for her, but she hangs in there with me anyway.
You don't create the frustration. I think you bring to light the frustrations that exist in the world sometimes. I'm like, why is it's like you share these observations and it's like it's things that we are, maybe aware of, but why do they have to be this way or why can't they be a different way? So
Right.
I say that, and whenever I share that with you, I know it always gets a chuckle out of you. Like, why are you saying I'm frustrating? You're not frustrating me. It's like the situation can be frustrating. By the way, for those of you, if you're visiting Lee's profile on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Meadows Lee, MEADOWSLEE. If you visit his profile, you're going to notice that the follow button is the default. If you want to connect with Lee, you'll have to click on the more button, and then you should see the option that will say personalized invite or connect. Mention that you watched him on the live-a-thon with Brenda. Drop my name in there. That way he'll know how you came about him. So thank you so much, Lee. It's been a delight. And if this were a real in-person event, you would be our opening keynote speaker for the day. And I think you really knocked it out of the park. So thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks. I'm going to follow this over on your LinkedIn page, Brenda. So thank you for the opportunity.